Welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. You've got Logan Jones here with Evan Knowles recording out of the Awesome Inc. studio. And this evening we sat down with Lecresha Sewell, who is the founder and CEO of Melanated Healthcare. So Melanated Healthcare is going after a really important problem. They are helping people of color connect with healthcare providers who share their ethnic background. So we got this intro from Aaron over at the Launch Blue team. So we just want to give a big thank you for connecting us to Lecresha. And we got to cover in this conversation Lecresha's background. You know, she had a child when she was 20 years old and still managed to get all sorts of degrees to become a doctor and then also launch her own company. So we dive into her background. We talk about how the platform that she's building is allowing those people of color to get connected to those healthcare providers. And then we even cover a little bit about how she got started in the startup ecosystem. So awesome conversation.
Yeah. And we highlighted, what has her experience been, from just starting out to how she got to where she is now and where she wants to take the platform. Launch Blue has been a big part of that, as well as, many mentors. This was a great episode just to kind of hear from a founder that, had zero experience and has, found her way through what it's like to grow a business. And she's had a lot of success. She's had a lot of great patients sign up and get healthcare. And that's something that we love to see and we want to shine a light on, is not only the fact that she's a female founder, but she's a Black founder. And we want to highlight, more of those stories so that we can see more of that, in this region. So this is a really inspiring episode, and she's had a ton of success. So we are excited for you to listen to this.
Absolutely. Before we dive into this episode, we just want to get a quick word from our sponsors. Middle Tech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's entrepreneurship and innovation partner. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to work alongside an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you're a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information at kyinnovation.com.
Middle Tech is sponsored by Render Capital, which is proud to present this year's 2022 Render competition. Are you a startup founder who could use $100,000? If so, our friends at Render Capital want you to apply. Render Capital invests $100,000 into 8 early-stage startups each year to help them scale their solution and attract future investment. Your startup should be one of those startups. I was one of those startups. My company, Simba, won in 2021. It's been an amazing experience. Patrick Henshaw and that whole team there at Render Capital are doing amazing things, helping entrepreneurs. And I encourage everybody to apply that has a startup that fits the criteria. And applications are open now, and the deadline is May 8th. To learn more about the Render competition and apply, go to render.capital/competition/. Or check out today's episode description for a direct link. Again, that's render.capital/competition/. Our next sponsor is the Johnson Law Group and Brandon Johnson. Brandon represents my startup, and I've had great experience with him and works with companies from inception to billion-dollar valuations. Whether you are trying to formalize a side hustle or bring new technology to market, the Johnson Law Group is willing to help by offering a free 30-minute consult. Schedule yours today at thejohnsonlawgroup.com and tell him that we sent you. All right, welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. You've got Evan Knowles and Logan Jones here, recording out of the Awesome Inc. studio. And we're sitting down with Lecresha Sewell, who is the CEO, founder of Melanated Healthcare. So we're looking forward to learning all about her business and how she is helping people of color find and match with doctors to give them medical attention and healthcare. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here tonight.
Yeah, awesome. Before we get into Melanated, let's get into your background. So when we got on a call before this recording, we loved hearing about your background, how you arrived at becoming an entrepreneur. So we want to talk all about that experience. And first, let's start with your background. So where are you from, your education and professional background up until you started the business? We'd love to hear about it.
Sure thing. So I live in Louisville, Kentucky. As far as my educational background, I received a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from the University of Louisville, a Master of Science of Nursing with a concentration in women's health from the University of Cincinnati, and a Doctor of Nursing Practice from Chatham University in Pittsburgh. So I practice as a women's health nurse practitioner. I'm also credentialed as a sexual assault nurse examiner. So my background in healthcare led me to venture into this business. So yeah.
Awesome. And let's talk about, I guess, the origin story I guess let's start there and then we'll dive deep into the business. So, at what point in your career did you say, okay, it's time for me to start a business? And what was the problem you were wanting to solve?
Honestly, I don't know that there's a aha moment to where I was just like, yay, let me go be a business owner. My whole background has been in healthcare. Even in undergrad, going forth, like I never had a vision of necessarily becoming a business owner. But I think this venture started out with my experience in healthcare. In undergrad, I got pregnant, had a son at 20, and that led me on my venture into healthcare. But ultimately, that experience kind of paved the way as to my perspective and the need that we in our society don't necessarily always have an answer for, or like I said, the solution wasn't there. So that experience led me to my venture as a business owner. And as I mentioned, being a provider in practice, having patients that specifically seek my care because we share the same racial or cultural background, and then them requesting another provider that they may be able to connect with on that level as well. Again, that was truly a driver. And I really just thought that, I really need to create a resource for people that want to have the option to choose a provider in that way.
Yeah, and describe the platform and how you're actually matching up patients with doctors and healthcare professionals who match up with their culture, their racial background, racial identity. Talk us through how that whole matching process works on the platform.
Yeah, so currently with the platform being in the MVP, I'm sure you guys as founders and business people know that term, but in the MVP, it is still like in a directory format. So basically a provider can sign up on the platform that identifies as a Black or brown provider. And from there, when an app user signs up, you can see how far out a provider is from your current location. Going forth, we are actually partnered with the University of Louisville and doing some research to try and figure out what exact features that we need to make this matching ideal for our patients and providers. So we do plan to enhance that feature and really hone in on the matchmaking features specific to patient and provider needs.
Let's talk about the supply side. So you've got to get these doctors onto the platform. How are you going out and finding these doctors and convincing them to join? What's the incentive for them to join your platform?
Yeah, most definitely. So ultimately, the incentive, most physicians and providers, they function on quality measures, RVUs. So making sure that they have that connection with patients will likely improve the health experience, because the data literature shows that patients who are not cared for by healthcare professionals that share the same racial or cultural background have worse health outcomes and experiences. So having that matchmaking makes a world of a difference as well. And as far as the delivery and what have you, and then just again, knowing that you're making a difference in a patient's life and that experience is absolutely amazing.
Can you go into some examples? So you mentioned there that the outcomes are better. Can you go more into maybe some tangible examples of outcomes and some examples you've seen throughout your career on how your platform can make a difference there?
Yeah, sure thing. So as far as the health outcomes that are improved, typically more so, and with me being a women's health nurse practitioner, I'm more familiar with OBGYN on a day-to-day basis, but just their compliance is a lot better if they are able to connect with their patients. So therefore, ultimately, the outcomes improve. They're being seen, being cared for, making those appointments, which is critical in care, especially in the maternity world. They're able to actually drive down the risk, like chronic hypertension, gestational high blood pressure, the risk for a condition called preeclampsia, compliance with gestational diabetes. All those health outcomes tend to improve and drive down the severity of those conditions when they are matched with a provider, again, that they can trust and would allow them to truly care for them.
How does all of this kind of tie in and work with the current healthcare system? Are there any things that make it complicated when you're trying to select a specific doctor and you're trying to make sure they're within your, coverage plan that you have currently? Does that complicate the whole process any?
Well, it is a very complex situation. in customer discovery, I learned that a lot of the healthcare systems, well, not a lot of them, well, they don't capture how a provider identifies, which is truly problematic, because if you don't know the providers within the system, then how can you reach the patients, or how can you make the connection with the patients when they're seeking that specific provider, when they have to scour through providers, and it's just really a challenge when you don't really have that set option readily available to you. So the health systems don't capture it. It's not being captured by health insurance. It's a true need there, true gap in care, honestly.
And talk about how the patients are finding you all. How are you attracting, patients to your platform from a marketing perspective, getting them into your platform and then getting them to convert? Talk about what that experience has been like, because you mentioned on your website you've got over 1,000, I think it was, patients. That's impressive. So talk about how you've done that.
Thank you. So yeah, a lot of it, you'd be surprised, word of mouth is amazing, but a lot of social media advertising as well, and then getting out there in the community. I mean, show your face, be there, be present for the people, which is our ultimate goal. We do community events when possible. With the grant that we are partnered with U of L, really getting that feedback from them, the providers, and really, again, just getting the word out there so providers can even tell their patients about it, especially, like I said, in my position, I've experienced that where I'm just like, well, I don't really know, anyone else necessarily to refer you out to, but that is also something that we've had to, and providers that are on the platform, they totally light up when they're just like, hey, I recently, like just this past week, I had a OBGYN tell me, and she was just like, yeah, I had a patient that said they found me on your platform. It's like, that's awesome. So yeah, and they're able, again, to all share word of mouth events, organizations.
And walk us through the stage of the business. So how much have you guys fundraised, if any, and how big is the team right now?
Yeah, so right now, our focus hasn't really been so much heavily on fundraising, although, fundraising would be, oh my heavens, a beautiful thing right now. But considering that we're doing a lot more of the customer discovery with the grant, and making sure, again, that when we do implement our features and do the commercial launch, that we'll be ready according to the research and the data that we analyze. But we did actually do some crowdfunding with the Louisville reunion, and we got like $4,000 for that. I was a keynote speaker at an event called Autumn, so I was able to get a payment from doing that as well. So yeah, again, not super actively fundraising, but love to. But right now, again, more of the customer discovery phase still, and making sure that we are sure about our product market fit going forward. And then as far as our team, we have 5 that we're transitioning. Our former developer is signing off, and we actually have another person that's signing on as a CTO currently. So we actually have 5 people that are currently on our team.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask there, talk about your process of like getting started with all of this. Once you decided you wanted to start a business, what were some of the first things you did to try and get this platform built for the people that you wanted to serve with it?
Yeah, so a lot of research trying to figure out who would be in alignment with our mission, who would be able to deliver, in regards to their skills and contribution towards the business. So when we first started out, it was just me by myself working hand in hand, getting my vision out to the developer, and us going back and forth until we were able to push out our product in iOS. And then once iOS really started gaining some traction, like we were getting quite a few downloads. I think within the first few months we had like over like 400 or 500 down. It was pretty good. I was like, wow, I'm not even really advertising. And then we did the launch of our MVP on May 24th of 2021. So yeah.
Awesome. And keep going.
Oh no, you're just fine.
I was going to ask how the growth of the platform is planned, going forward. You mentioned you are really doing customer discovery. Mm-hmm. What are some things coming out of that customer discovery that you plan on implementing, to grow the platform going forward?
So going forward, again, just really being able to implement the features that we feel are most valuable for both the patients and providers. We want to ensure that this resource that we've created is a good fit for both sides. So really getting their feedback, relying on that to implement the additional features and to draw more providers and more patients that use our platform, and really analyzing that data, as I mentioned, is really going to be key and critical to getting that information to ensure that, again, our product is the best resource that's out there. So yeah.
And you're not technical, so
Nope.
speaking of the platform, walk us through, because one of the biggest struggles that I know founders have, especially non-technical founders, I had this struggle, is figuring out how to get the product built and working with the right people to do that. Talk about what you have discovered and experienced on that front.
That has been a major challenge. And just feeling ignorant in that space, and really knowing what questions to ask. And, sometimes your vision is this, but then you get kind of drawn back like, hey, no, that may not work out that may not be the best way to go about it. So my experience is really just making sure you're asking the right questions, making sure that whomever you're working with is willing to share their knowledge. Don't just go in blindly, because that's like probably an epic fail. But, and yeah, considering that when you are not technologically intelligent, really making sure that you have someone that you can trust, that can help guide you through the process, and really being self-motivated to learn for yourself as well.
Did you have anyone that was kind of mentoring you through this process, or did you just pretty much dive in to try and finding a developer and getting this thing built? How did you go about learning what even questions to be asking a developer?
Yeah, so I have a business mentor named Kimberly Bunton, and she's a serial entrepreneur, amazing woman. So she's actually helped me quite a bit through this process, even getting through going to apply for the accelerators that we've done, and different opportunities that have come about. So
Got it. Now, where we wanted to spend a good amount of this time on the interview was talking about how you balance, normal life with being an entrepreneur. This is something that we try to talk with entrepreneurs about as much as we can. We've talked about how people balance faith with being an entrepreneur, how people balance family life with being an entrepreneur. And so that's one of the big struggles that entrepreneurs, tend to have is, how do I balance the other parts of my life with, this consuming professional career? Because as an entrepreneur, you're always on. So walk us through. You mentioned you had a child at the age of 20. You've been building your career, going to school. You have got several degrees, and then you start a business. Talk about some of the tips and how you've been able to balance all this and start a business.
Yeah, so I actually have two people I'm responsible for now, but nevertheless, family life is it's always going to be, very, very vital to have that support from them, and making sure that you communicate well with your family. I have conversations every day with my husband, with my children, let them know, this is what we're doing today, and then trying to schedule accordingly. So what activities are we doing? Really planning, really making sure that you don't necessarily allow that entrepreneurial spirit to overshadow the fact that you still are a human being, you still need to live, and you still have to find time for what's most important, which is family and the life that you live. So really making it a priority to make sure that you find time to live. So that is one of the things that I really stress. And then also just being really driven and focused. Time management is critical. You want to make sure that you have it planned out. I have several planners, several notebooks all throughout, several calendars. I think we all do as entrepreneurs. But yeah, again, the biggest thing is making sure that you plan and prioritize, and in the world of healthcare, triage those things and get it done. So yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that we wanted to get your perspective on is your perspective building in this region as a Black woman that, we just don't hear enough of those stories, especially out of this region of people stepping out and starting companies. So we'd love to hear your perspective of being a Black woman entrepreneur and finding success in this region.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because ultimately my whole career, I've usually been the only Black person or Black woman in a room. So it's pretty a normal space for me, which is kind of sad to say, but it's actually pretty true. So just being comfortable in being different and making a path for others behind me to do the same and create their own space and own it. So I'm totally comfortable with it, although, some people may not be, but I want to make sure that the people that I bring along the way can create their own space, create their own comfort, and we can just build from there. So, yeah.
What are some ways that we can foster more of a community that, to your point, brings people along with you and encourages, more Black founders. What are some ways that we as a community can do better on that front?
Well, honestly, if I had not been introduced to like the startup world by Kimberly, she's a Black serial entrepreneur, I don't know that I would have known all the opportunity there. So really looking, like extending a hand out, say, hey, were you aware that this exists? Even to just a random person, like I love sharing opportunities. I'm like, any chance that I get with just anybody, I love to help people. Obviously that's my career, but yeah. And so I think just extending that knowledge, those resources out to create opportunity for them, and then they can do the same for others. So I think that would make a world of a difference. And just, again, knowing is half the battle. So again, if I hadn't known, then
just awareness.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that we try to do through media here is, when we find somebody that's kind of separated themselves out and is doing it and providing a good example for others, telling that story and kind of holding that founder up and saying, here's an example that you can go by is a big part of what we try to do here at Middle Tech. So talk a little bit about just your experience in general, getting into the startup ecosystem in this region specifically, whether that's the people you've encountered or the programs that you've gotten involved with. What's been your experience being involved in this region startup community?
Once you get involved in the startup community, I tell you, people get to know you very quickly. It's amazing. I've met so many wonderful people. So it has been an amazing experience. So I would say for any founder that is kind of toying with the idea of, maybe doing an accelerator, like I'm doing Launch Blue, or Accelerate Health or what have you, apply for it, take that chance and really get out there. You will be surprised by how much you'll learn, how much you'll grow, and the opportunities that exist.
Walk us through your experience so far with Launch Blue, because it's a newer program. I'm not sure we've had a lot of entrepreneurs on the podcast that have gone through that program. Tell us about what it is, your experience. We've had Laura on the podcast, and she's amazing. Give us your perspective as a founder going through that program.
Well, honestly, I have, and again, this isn't my first accelerator, but I have truly learned so much information from them. Eric is awesome. Jake is awesome. Every single person has invested their time and energy into ensuring that we have a solid foundation as founders. I have been so pleased and so thankful to be a part of this cohort. I'm really happy that I took the time to apply and was accepted and given this opportunity. So again, the focus is really creating that foundation to ensure that you can create, build from there. So yeah, it has been wonderful. And it is a pre-seed accelerator, as you know. So for those who are unaware, pre-seed is before you have raised. But anywho.
Yeah, and is it a lot of workshops? Is a lot of just talking with other founders? Walk us through what does that experience look like? Yeah, within the cohort.
Yeah, certainly. So we meet once a week as a group, as a cohort. We have one-on-one coaching sessions with our coaches every week to kind of give them updates, see how we're doing, kind of, obviously mentorship. And some of us founders have gotten to a point to where we're exchanging information, resources. So it's been really great in that way as well.
I think that's one of the most important parts of being a part of the startup community is sharing with other founders, even if it's just, sharing your hardships of being a founder, sharing things like introductions to capital and just best practices when starting a business. I feel like that's got to be one of the best parts of being part of the startup community and the most value you get out of it.
Yeah. I think just having people that are empathetic, towards what you're going through, it's a very lonely, journey. If you don't surround yourself with people that know what it's like to go through that, it's tough. And I went through, the Vote Awards, the Awesome Inc. Fellowship, Render Capital, and been involved in all these amazing organizations. And I can't imagine being a founder and not going through that stuff, especially as a first time founder. I've been around startups for a long time, but that first time you start a business and it's yours, it's very scary. And having those people alongside you, like Logan was saying, is super important. Who are some of the founders that you've worked with the most? You mentioned your mentor, but what are some of the other founders that you have exchanged war stories with and have helped you along the road?
Well, Bennett Gatto, he was in my cohort with Accelerate Health. We kind of check in on each other every now and again. He's super awesome with active therapy. I'm thinking active day. I think that's another. But anywho, his physical therapy virtual business is amazing. Maya McClendon, we connected.
Yes. Maya's amazing. I went through the vote awards with her. She's an awesome entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Love what she's doing with the Time Out.
For sure.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Well, as we kind of wrap this up here, we always like ending on a forward-looking statement. So talk about where you want to see Melanated Healthcare going into the next 3 to 5 years.
For sure. So within the next 3 to 5 years, most definitely have that commercial launch that I mentioned to you. So hopefully sooner than later. We're looking forward to partnering with some other businesses and really expanding our platform to more of a nationwide presence within that 5-year mark. We're also implementing telehealth into our platform going forward to focus in on primary care, women's health, and behavioral health in the Kentucky state only for now. But those are some of the major goals that we have, and really looking forward to, again, creating the best resource that we can for our patients and providers. So, yeah.
I want to dig in before we leave on the telehealth thing, because there's such a shift during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So walk the audience through, what does telehealth look like on your platform? And how does that, add additional value? Because there's so many ways that telehealth is being leveraged right now, but how are you going to leverage it?
Yeah, so we haven't embedded telehealth just yet. Again, with the whole directory side, we're still working towards building that, because obviously a B2B versus a B2C, those are totally separate situations. But in our platform, our providers will be able to select to opt in to being able to have telehealth visits that are located here in Kentucky that can do primary care, women's health, and behavioral health. So again, it isn't ready just yet, but that is something within the next 3 to 5 years that we're looking to do. With COVID, it has, like you said, just been significantly increased in use. I had probably done maybe a handful of visits prior to COVID, but then once COVID hit, it really became a pretty normal way to care for patients through technology. So it's been amazing. So really leveraging that and making sure that we're ensuring the access. With the directory, we can give them the information, but being able to make sure that access is being created, which is our ultimate goal with Melanated Healthcare, increasing access to non-discriminatory exceptional care, is going to be critical there.
Awesome. And we always like to make sure that the audience listening can find you. So plug, your website and where you want to drive people to learn more about your business.
For sure. So my website is www.melanated, spelled MELANATED, healthcare.app. And I'm also located Lecresha Sewell on LinkedIn, and Melanated Healthcare is also on LinkedIn. On Instagram, Melanated Healthcare, Twitter, Melanated Health 1, and also we're on Facebook, Melanated Healthcare.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on and joining us, and we're excited to watch Melanated Healthcare continue to grow.
I appreciate you. Thank you, guys.